I was 8 years old when my mother killed my twin sister, and I was the one who went to prison for it. Not a real prison. Something worse. A psychiatric facility for children who were too dangerous for regular foster care. I was there for 10 years, from 8 to 18, learning to say I drowned my sister in therapy sessions, where the counselors nodded and made notes. Learning to believe it, because the alternative was knowing that my mother, the woman who visited once a year with peppermint candies and the same question, had held Celeste under the water while I watched from the garden window, my hands pressed against the glass, my breath fogging the pain. I watched her die. I watched the bubbles stop. I watched my mother wrap her in a blue towel and lay her on the grass like she was sleeping. And then I watched my mother walk into the kitchen, call the police, and cry into the phone with a voice that sounded exactly like grief. "She's dead," my mother said. "My baby, my Celeste." Her sister held her under. "Ilara, she's always been jealous. She's always been violent. She's only 8, but she's not right. She's not right." I was standing in the doorway when the police arrived, wet from the rain because I'd run outside screaming, my hands shaking because I'd seen what I'd seen but couldn't make my mouth form the words. The officer looked at me, a small, dark-haired girl with my sister's face, and he saw what my mother had told him to see: a murderer, a child psychopath, a girl who drowned her identical twin because she wanted to be the only one. They didn't arrest me, they couldn't, I was 8, but they took me to a facility, to a room with a window that didn't open and a door that locked from the outside. To 10 years of medication, of therapy, of learning to say I'm sorry for something I didn't do, until the sorry became a habit, then a belief, then a skin I wore because my real skin had been burned off by the truth. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're here, maybe you know what it means to be punished for a crime that was done to you. Maybe you know the particular horror of watching the real killer cry at the funeral while you sit in a locked room, learning to say I did it because it's the only way they'll let you out. Maybe you know what it's like to have your own face become evidence against you, the twin face, the matching DNA, the prosecutor's dream of sibling rivalry gone wrong. If that's you, subscribe. Not because I have comfort, because I have a witness. And because the story I'm about to tell you ends with me standing on a stage in front of 500 psychologists, holding my sister's crayon diary, while my mother, the expert on child psychopaths, had a stroke that left her paralyzed, speechless, and finally unable to lie. Here's my story. Celeste and I were born 11 minutes apart. I was first, the elder by barely a breath, and my mother never forgave me for it. Celeste was the baby, the delicate one, the one who got sick more often, who cried louder, who needed more. I was the strong one, the loud one, the one who asked questions. Our mother, Margaret Hale, was a pediatric nurse. Not just any nurse, the best, the most decorated, the one other nurses called when a child was dying and the parents needed to be told. She had a gift for grief. She could hold a mother's hand and say I'm sorry in a way that made the mother feel seen, held, almost lucky to have been loved by someone who understood loss so completely. What no one knew was that Margaret manufactured the grief she comforted, that she had a taste for it, that she needed to be the witness, the survivor, the one who'd been through it all and emerged with her compassion intact. She started with us. I was 4 when I first noticed something wrong. Celeste and I were taking a bath, the way we always did, in the big clawfoot tub our grandmother had left us. Margaret was sitting on the closed toilet, reading a magazine, her face calm. Then she looked up. She looked at Celeste. And she reached into the water and held my sister's head under, for 3 seconds, maybe 4. Long enough for Celeste to thrash, for bubbles to rise, for me to scream. Then she let go. Celeste came up gasping, her face red, her eyes wide with confusion and terror. "Mommy," she said. "Don't splash so much," Margaret said, her voice mild. "You'll drown yourselves." She went back to her magazine. Celeste and I sat in the water, holding each other, too young to understand what had happened but old enough to know it was wrong. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? My father was dead, a car accident when we were 2, or so we were told. Our grandparents were distant, formal, afraid of Margaret's competence. And Celeste forgot, or seemed to. She was 5, then 6, then 7, and she never mentioned the bathtub, never flinched at water, never acted like anything was wrong. But things were wrong. Celeste started having episodes. She'd wake up screaming, saying Mommy hurt me, then forget she'd said it by morning. She'd refuse to eat, then binge. She'd draw pictures of water, always water, blue and black and bubbling, and our mother would smile at the therapists and say she's artistic. Sensitive, like her father was, I was the tough one, the one who didn't cry. The one who watched, who remembered, who stored everything in a box in my mind labeled later. I thought if I was strong enough, if I was smart enough, I could protect Celeste. I could get us out. I was 8 when I found the blood. It was a Saturday morning in March. Celeste and I shared a room, twin beds with matching pink bedspreads, a nightlight between them shaped like a moon. I woke up because Celeste was whimpering. She was curled on her side, her knees to her chest, her hands between her legs. "Cease," I whispered. "What's wrong?" She rolled over. The sheet was red. Her nightgown was red. Her face was white, her eyes too wide, her lips trembling. "Don't tell," she said. "Mommy said it's our secret. She said if you know, she'll do it to you too." I ran to the bathroom. I got a towel. I tried to clean her up, but the blood kept coming and Celeste kept crying, and then our mother was in the doorway, her face composed, her voice soft. "Ilara, go downstairs, make cereal. She's bleeding, go downstairs, now." I went. I sat at the kitchen table. I poured Cheerios I couldn't eat. I listened to the water running upstairs, to Celeste's muffled sobs, to my mother's voice, low, rhythmic, comforting, telling her it was okay, it was normal, it was just a special bath to make you feel better. An hour later, Celeste came downstairs. She was wearing clean pajamas. She was smiling the way she always smiled after my mother fixed things. She ate her cereal. She didn't remember, or she pretended not to. But I remembered. I remembered the blood. I remembered the secret. And I remembered the bathtub. That afternoon, my mother filled the tub. She said it was a special bath for Celeste to help her relax. She sent me outside to play. I went to the backyard, but I didn't play. I climbed the oak tree that grew beside the house, the one with branches that reached the bathroom window. I looked through the glass. I saw Celeste in the water. I saw my mother kneeling beside the tub. I saw her hands on Celeste's shoulders, pushing down, holding her under. I saw Celeste's legs kicking, water splashing, the bubbles rising. I saw my mother's face, calm, focused, almost peaceful, the same face she wore when she held a dying child's hand at the hospital. I screamed. I fell from the tree. I ran inside, wet from the rain that had started while I watched, my hands bleeding from the bark, my voice raw. I found the bathroom door locked. I pounded. I screamed Celeste's name. The door opened. My mother stood there, her clothes dry, her hair perfect. Behind her, Celeste floated in the water, face down, her black hair spread like a fan. "She slipped," my mother said. "She hit her head. I tried to save her, Ilara. I tried." She pushed past me. She went to the kitchen. She called the police. And while she cried into the phone, I stood in the bathroom doorway, 8 years old, looking at my sister's body, knowing what I'd seen, knowing no one would believe me, knowing that my mother's grief was already more real than my witness. The police believed her. Of course they did. She was Margaret Hale, pediatric nurse, grief counselor, the woman who'd held half the department's hands through their own losses. She was crying, composed, devastated, perfect. And I was a child with scratches on my hands and a story about a mother drowning her sister in a bathtub. Children often blame themselves, the child psychologist told the detectives, in a report I read years later. Or they project guilt onto others. Ilara likely pushed Celeste in a moment of jealousy, common in twins, and invented the mother's involvement to cope with her own actions. I didn't push her. I didn't touch her. I was in a tree, screaming, too far away to stop anything. But I was 8, and my mother was Margaret. And the story of the violent twin was more palatable than the story of the murderous mother. They took me to the juvenile psychiatric facility that night. I didn't get to go to Celeste's funeral. I didn't get to say goodbye. I was told years later that my mother wore black and spoke about the tragedy of mental illness in children, about the warning signs she wished she'd seen, about the importance of early intervention for children who show violent tendencies. She visited me once a year, always on Celeste's birthday, always with peppermint candies, Celeste's favorite, not mine, always with the same question. "Do you remember what you did, Ilara? Do you remember your sister?" I remembered everything. But I learned over 10 years to say what she wanted. "Yes, Mom, I'm sorry, I'm working on it." "Good," she'd say, and she'd pat my hand the way she patted grieving mothers at the hospital. "That's all I ask, that you remember, and that you're sorry." I was sorry. Sorry I couldn't save Celeste. Sorry I climbed the tree instead of breaking the window. Sorry I was born first, was stronger, was the one who survived. But I was not sorry for something I didn't do. And somewhere, deep in the box where I kept the truth, a small voice whispered, "Wait, watch, she will make a mistake, they always do." I was released on my 18th birthday, not because I was healed, the facility's word, but because I was legally an adult and the state couldn't hold me anymore. I had no family, no money, no history that wasn't poisoned. My mother had moved to another state, changed her name to Margaret Vance, and built a new career as Dr. Margaret Vance, expert in childhood trauma and juvenile psychosis. She wrote books, The Violent Child, Early Signs and Interventions, When Siblings Kill, Understanding Twin Rivalry, Breaking the Cycle, Treating Child Perpetrators. In every book, there was a case study, unnamed but with details I recognized. The twin who drowned her sister, the jealous sibling, the classic presentation of emergent psychopathy in prepubescent females. I read them in the library, my hands shaking, my stomach heaving. She was using Celeste's death to build her empire, using my imprisonment to prove her theories, using our tragedy, her crime, to become the voice that other professionals quoted, cited, trusted. I changed my name. I dyed my hair Celeste, and I had been black-haired. I became blonde. I got contact lenses to hide the green eyes that were my mother's exact shade. I went to nursing school, then to graduate school, then to a doctoral program in psychology. I specialized in childhood trauma, in children who were called liars, in survivors who were called perpetrators. I became the expert my mother pretended to be. I found Maya by accident. She was 9, referred to my practice by a school counselor who didn't know what to do with a child who made up stories about family members. Maya had nightmares. She drew disturbing pictures. She flinched when her grandmother visited. Her grandmother was a retired nurse named Patricia Hale, my mother's former colleague. In our third session, Maya drew a bathtub, 2 identical girls, a woman with large hands holding one under the water. She colored the water black, then blue, then red. "Where did you see this?" I asked, my voice steady only through years of practice. "My grandma told me," Maya said. "She said it happened a long time ago in another place. She said the bad sister killed the good one. She said the bad sister was in a hospital for crazy kids. Did she tell you the names?" Maya shook her head. "She said it was a secret, but I dream about it. The girls look like me, like my sister, like the lady in the picture Grandma has." "What picture?" "The one in her special box. The one she told me never to touch." I drove to Patricia Hale's house that night. I didn't announce myself. I watched from the street until the lights went out, then I picked the lock, a skill I'd learned in the facility from children who'd been everywhere and done everything. I found the box in a closet. Inside, photographs of my mother and Patricia in nursing school, a newspaper clipping about the Hale tragedy, and a diary. Not my mother's. Celeste's. She'd written it in our secret code, the one we'd invented at 5, when we realized our mother read our things. A substitution cipher, childish but effective. I'd forgotten it over the years, but it came back as I read, like a language I'd never really lost. "Mama hurt me again, the special bath. She says it's love but it hurts. Ilara doesn't know. Mama says if I tell, Ilara goes to the bad place. I don't want Ilara to go. I want to go instead." Ilara found the blood. I saw her face. She knows something but not everything. "Mama says she'll make Ilara go away if I talk. I won't talk, I'll be good. I'll be so good, the bath is full. Mama says it's for both of us this time. She says Ilara is too loud, too watchful. She says we need to be quiet. I will be quiet, I will be so quiet." The last entry, dated the day before Celeste died. Ilara doesn't know. Mama says if I say anything, Ilara goes to the fire. I go to the water instead. Tell her it wasn't her fault. Tell her I chose. Tell her I love her more than air. I sat on Patricia Hale's floor holding my sister's last words, and I wept for the first time since I was 8. Not the controlled tears of therapy, not the practiced remorse of facility sessions. Real tears. Ugly tears. The tears of a child who'd watched her sister die and been told it was her fault. I took the diary. I left the box otherwise undisturbed. I drove to my apartment and I read Celeste's words until dawn, until my eyes burned, until the cipher and the truth were etched into my mind deeper than any lie my mother had told. I had proof. Not legal proof, a child's crayon drawings, a code that could be dismissed as fantasy, but proof enough for what I needed, not a court case. A reckoning. I spent 6 months preparing. I found my mother's schedule. She was still Dr. Margaret Vance, still giving keynote speeches, still consulting for juvenile courts. I attended one of her lectures, sitting in the back, wearing a blonde wig and glasses that changed my eye color to brown. I watched her speak about the twin case, my case, with the same compassion she'd used at the hospital, the same grief, the same authority. The perpetrator, she said, showed classic signs of narcissistic rivalry from age 4. By 8, she developed a fantasy life in which her mother was the villain, allowing her to externalize her own violent impulses. It's a tragic case, but instructive. Early intervention, inpatient treatment, medication, structured therapy can prevent these children from becoming adult offenders. I sat in the darkened auditorium, my hands clenched so hard my nails drew blood, and I smiled. Because I saw what she didn't: the desperation under the authority, the way she glanced at the exits, the way her hand shook when she took a sip of water. She was aging, she was alone. Her husband, my stepfather, a man I'd never met, had left her 5 years ago. Her colleagues were younger, hungrier, less interested in her classic cases. She was planning a final conference, a legacy event, where she would present her life's work and hand the mantle to her chosen successor. I would be that successor. I approached her after the lecture. I used a false name, Dr. Alina Voss, a name I'd built carefully over years, with publications, with credentials, with a backstory of working with traumatized children in the foster system. She was flattered, impressed, lonely enough to welcome a disciple. We corresponded. We met for coffee. I praised her work, cited her books, told her she'd inspired my career. She ate it up, the way she'd always eaten up admiration, grief, attention. She invited me to collaborate on her final project, a comprehensive case study presentation for the National Conference on Juvenile Psychology. I accepted. I helped her organize her files. I learned her patterns, her passwords, her fears, and while I did, I sent her gifts. A blue towel, the exact shade she'd used on Celeste. No note. A photograph, aged to look old, of 2 identical girls in a bathtub. No note. A cassette tape found in a thrift store of a child's voice singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, the song Celeste had sung every night before bed. No note. She called me after the 3rd gift, her voice tight. "Alina, have you been sending me things?" "Things?" I asked, innocent, concerned. "No, Margaret, is everything okay?" "Fine. Just someone is playing a prank, it's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I could hear it in her voice. The paranoia, the fear, the same fear she'd instilled in Celeste, in me, in every child she'd treated over the years. She was aging, isolated, and suddenly the past was knocking at her door. I escalated. I sent her a copy of Celeste's diary, just 1 page, the last entry translated from the cipher. Tell her it wasn't her fault, no explanation, no return address. She called me that night, drunk, her voice cracking. "Alina, I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone. The twin case. The one in my books. It wasn't exactly as I described." Oh, I kept my voice gentle. "Therapeutic. Tell me, Margaret. I'm here." But she couldn't, not yet. She hung up, sobbing, and I knew I had her. The conference was held in a hotel ballroom, 500 psychologists, social workers, judges, and policymakers. The theme: legacy and truth in child psychology. Margaret was the keynote. I was the moderator. She'd asked me to present a surprise case study, something new, something that would cement her legacy as the discoverer of patterns others missed. I'd prepared a presentation. She hadn't seen it. She took the stage at 9:00 a.m., looking smaller than I remembered. Her hair was gray, her posture still perfect but brittle. She spoke about her career, her difficult cases, her breakthrough insights. She mentioned the twin case twice, her voice catching with practiced emotion. "And now," she said, "my colleague Dr. Voss will present a case that brings together everything we've discussed. A story of trauma, of misdiagnosis, of the system's failure to see what was truly happening." I walked to the podium. I was wearing a suit the color of water, blue-gray, the color of the bathtub that day. My hair was my own, black, the way it had been when I was 8. My eyes were my own, green, my mother's eyes. Looking back at her from the stage. "Thank you, Dr. Vance," I said. My voice was steady, it didn't shake. It was the voice of a woman who had practiced this moment for 20 years. "The case I'd like to present is one you know well, though perhaps not as well as you think." I pressed the button. The screen behind me filled with a photograph. 2 girls, 8 years old, black hair, green eyes, matching smiles. Celeste and me. The last photo taken before she died. "The subject," I said, "is a pair of identical twins, born 11 minutes apart. One was named Celeste, the other Ilara." I heard Margaret's sharp intake of breath. I didn't look at her. Celeste died on March 14, 2003. Her death was ruled an accidental drowning, perpetrated by her twin sister, who was subsequently institutionalized for 10 years. The case has been cited in 3 books, 17 journal articles, and countless court proceedings as a classic example of emergent psychopathy in prepubescent females. The next slide. The bathroom window, the oak tree, the view from where I'd sat. But the witness, I continued, tells a different story. The witness, 8 years old, wet, bleeding, screaming, saw her mother hold her sister under the water. She saw her mother wrap the body in a blue towel. She saw her mother call the police and blame her surviving daughter, and she spent 10 years in a locked facility, learning to say I'm sorry for a crime committed against her. The next slide. Celeste's diary, the crayon writing, the cipher translated. Fortunately, I said the real victim kept a record, in a code only her twin could read, a record of abuse, of threats, of a mother's special baths that left her bleeding, and of a final choice to die so her sister might live. The room was silent. I could feel 500 eyes on me on the screen. On Margaret. Dr. Vance, I said, turning to face her, would you like to comment on the discrepancy between your published account and the primary source material? She was white. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair. I don't know what year this is. Who are you? I removed my glasses. The colored contacts. I shook out my hair, let it fall the way it had when I was 8, and screaming and no one listened. I'm Alara, I said. The twin who didn't die. Daughter, you drowned in lies, and I've spent 20 years learning to speak in a voice you can't dismiss. I pressed the button again. The video played. Margaret in her office 3 weeks ago, drunk on the wine I'd sent her, talking to Alina about the twin case. Celeste was weak, she said on screen, her voice slurred but clear. She would have talked. She would have ruined everything. Alara was stronger, but she watched too much. She saw too much. The drowning it was clean. Medical. What Celeste needed. What the situation required. The room erupted. Not with applause. With the sound of chairs scraping back, of voices rising, of phones being lifted to record. I saw judges I recognized from Margaret's consultations. I saw social workers who'd cited her books. I saw the president of the American Board of Child Psychology standing, his face dark with dawning horror. Margaret tried to stand. Her left leg buckled. She grabbed for the chair, missed, fell to the floor. Her face twisted, the left side drooping, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for water. Stroke, someone shouted. Call 911. I didn't move. I stood at the podium and I watched her twitch on the carpet, her eyes rolling to find me, her mouth working to form words that wouldn't come. The left side of her body was paralyzed. The side that had held Celeste down. The side that had written books about my violence. I walked to her. I knelt beside her. I leaned close so only she could hear, and I whispered, Do you remember what you did, Mom? Do you remember my sister? I do, and now everyone does. Her eyes, my eyes, green and terrified, found mine. She tried to speak. A bubble of spit formed at the corner of her mouth. I wiped it away with a blue handkerchief I'd brought for the occasion, the exact shade of the towel she'd used on Celeste. SHH, I said, it's okay, I'm here. I've been here all along. The paramedics came. They loaded her onto a stretcher. She survived. Margaret was always a survivor, but she never spoke clearly again. The stroke damaged her speech center, left her with aphasia, with a body that wouldn't obey, with a mind that knew everything and could say nothing. She lived 6 more years in a nursing home. I didn't visit. I sent flowers on Celeste's birthday, blue delphiniums, the color of water, with cards that read simply, Remember. She couldn't speak, but her nurses told me she screamed when the flowers came. Screamed until she was hoarse, until they sedated her, until the staff learned to remove the cards before bringing the vase to her room. I didn't go to the police. I didn't need to. The video went viral. Margaret's books were pulled from print. The cases she'd consulted on were reviewed. 3 children she'd testified against were released from facilities. 2 others, already adults, sued for wrongful commitment. The system she'd built, the system that had swallowed me, cracked open and let out the truth. I testified before a congressional committee. Not about my mother. About the industry she'd represented. The experts who manufactured diagnoses. The treatments that punished children for being victimized. The courts that listened to credentials instead of evidence. I spoke for 6 hours, and when I finished, a senator, a woman with gray hair and a scar on her wrist, stood up and said, Dr. Hale, on behalf of a system that failed you, I am sorry. It wasn't enough, it would never be enough, but it was something. I opened Celeste's Voice 2 years later, a center for children who are called liars, who are called violent, who are called crazy, who have stories no adult wants to believe. We don't diagnose, we don't medicate, we listen. We document, we believe. Maya, the girl who drew the bathtub, who started everything, is 16 now. She volunteers at the center on weekends. She wants to be a therapist. The kind who believes, she says. Every year on March 14th, I fill a bathtub with flowers. Blue delphiniums, white lilies, yellow daffodils, Celeste's favorite, the color of sunshine. I sit on the edge and I read her diary aloud. The whole thing in our secret code. The language of 2 girls who were everything to each other. And at the end, I always say, it wasn't my fault, cease, and it wasn't yours, and now the world knows.